who are opposing. Speaking for the proposition of first speaker Bell, second speaker Michani, and third speaker Harmony. Speaking for the opposition of first speaker me, second speaker Brian, and third speaker Rudy. Judging this debate are James from Country Wales, Nicholas Salmon from school at Country Australia, and Danny from USA. Please welcome them. Speaking time for the speeches are 8 minutes. The first and the last minutes are protected from points of information. A knock will be sounded after the first and the second minute. There are no points of information during the reply speeches. It is now my pleasure to welcome Javel, the first speaker of the proposition, to open the debate.
The government has a responsibility to ensure that children grow up in an environment where they can form identity on their own, ensure that these individuals are able to choose what type of identity they want to have. And we say that this is problematic in status quo for 2 reasons. Firstly, religious schools do not give these children the room or the space to form their identity. And secondly, we say it only further disallows societal change that can exist in status quo. Proposition defines religious primary and secondary schools as schools that force children to attend mass or church services where individuals are forced to go and pray. These kind of schools have classes where they are taught about the Bible. We say, who attends these religious schools? These children are 6 to 18 years old. These children are only beginning to rationalize and form their identity. We say that beyond 18 years old, you're granted the right to vote because the government recognizes that you have the ability to form your identity. You have the ability to ensure that you're able to make a rational choice after given sufficient information. However, we say that from 6 to 18 years old, these children do not have the ability to rationalize, and therefore we say religious primary and secondary schools entail these type of things. Today's proposition needs to prove to you 2 things. Firstly, why are these schools limiting the choice of children? And secondly, why is it justified to abolish it? Our model is very simple. We firstly allow the government to abolish religious primary and secondary schools, and secondly, we allow for a transition period for the children to find new schools, to allow them to find new avenues for them to get their education. Yes?
Will your side allow Muslim children to wear the hijab or Jewish children to eat kosher food in schools?
We say that we would actually allow this because we say that ultimately the difference and the distinction between what side opposition wants to propose is that we say that what we're allowing these children to do is that we're allowing them to we're actually giving them a choice, because schools ultimately are a place where you're able to form your own identity, able to understand the different choices and increase your own tolerance of individuals. What side opposition wants to do when they allow for the presence of these religious schools is that when these children are at home, they're indoctrinated by their parents. When they're in school, they're also indoctrinated by their teachers. We say that that's not the type of environment that we can sort. We say that there's a fundamental distinction. Moving on to my first argument. Why is it principally justified to abolish religious schools? Because when can the state step into religion? We're not limiting the rights of people to believe in a certain religion if they truly understand and want to do so. We say by the age of 18, you truly feel like you can rationalize and you truly feel like you want to believe in Christianity. We say that's up to you because you finished everything. What we're doing under such proposition is that we're limiting religious schools because they're the ones who take away the choices of people. They're the ones who take away the choices of these children. We said that, for example, in the US, once gay marriage was passed as a law by the state, it was made illegal for state officials to deny these type of marriage license to gay people, even if they were religiously against it. We say that we say that by the same logic, it shows that you're granted religious autonomy up until the point you hurt other people, up until the point where you step in and hurt other individuals. We said that the principle we are going to argue comes in consideration of practical circumstances, which is going to move beyond my second argument. On my second argument, why is it so harmful for why is it so harmful for these type of religious schools to exist? Because we have to ask, what is the purpose of education? Education fundamentally is to provide information to these children. It's to able to open up a value or arena for these children to understand the types of information present in status quo. Furthermore, we say it's to ensure that they have a choice to build up a moral compass for themselves. To increase the type of, to understand the types of people that exist within society. And we say that furthermore, it is supposed to allow them to increase tolerance and understand the choices of individuals. We say school is not limited to just what you learn from your teachers. School is how you build yourself as a moral identity, as a character for yourself. But what is the nature of religious schools, and how does it stop these children from doing it? Because with religious schools, where religion itself is the fundamental basis to what they teach you, religion cannot be argued with. Religion tells you what to think, where there is no right or wrong. This religion is black and white. We say that this is right in religion and nothing else is correct. For example, we say that Christianity or Islam is against homosexuality and how it is taught that girls have to behave or perform a certain way. We say that there isn't any fundamental basis behind it. It's just the way that religion seeks to exist and how that's the type of religious schools and the nature of religion. We say that the environment within these religious schools are so inherently linked to religion that everyone feels like there's a necessity to follow through, the necessity to believe it. We say that the consequence of not doing so is oftentimes exclusionary towards the environment you are in where you don't feel like you fit in, because there's an over-dominant narrative that believing in a certain religion is good, that believing in this type of Christianity or Islam is something you're supposed to do. We say that when you're in these religious schools, the only communities that exist are religious societies, and this is when you feel the inherent need to follow through, the inherent need to believe it, otherwise you're seen as an outcast, otherwise you are deserted from these communities.
Information, madam.
We say that furthermore, a lot of times these type of religious schools are schools where you spend the majority of time with. Things like boarding schools for Christian students, things like boarding schools for Islam students. And even if it's not a boarding school, we said that you spend 8 hours of your life in school, you spend 8 to 10 hours, and in your extracurricular activities, it's even more than that. We said that ultimately the amount of time you spend there, the amount of time you're exposed to these religious ideas, and the amount of time you're exposed to your religious teachers teaching you about why the Bible is good and the specific interpretations about it, it forces you to internalize it, it forces you to indoctrinate these type of beliefs. But why is this harmful? 3 reasons. Firstly, we say that children are basically indoctrinated within these religious schools. And not only that, they're not taught the full extent of the information provided within status quo. What do I mean? I mean that, for example, how evolution is not something that is generally accepted within status quo, within these type of religious community, how they deny the existence of evolution of human beings. We say that a lot of time in these religious schools, they're not going to be taught these type of things. And even if the opposition wants to make it a necessity for these schools to teach it, we say that ultimately they're not going to teach it to the full extent, and ultimately we say that the ability for schools to teach is fundamentally reduced. Secondly, we say that these individuals cannot form the identity on their own. Why? Because what type of interaction do you have within these type of schools? When these people are in school, the only thing that they can think about is how your classrooms have a cross in it. So your classroom has posters about why Jesus Christ is your Savior. We say when you have these type of things, when exposed to these type of environments, we say that automatically the only type of things that you can think about is why Christianity is good for you, because that's the narrative that your teachers are going to send to you within your classes. Therefore, we say that within these religious schools, you're not open up to different choices, and you cannot make these types of decisions on your own, because you're taught the same thing over and over and over again, in where your teachers tell you a specific thing and it's repeated through primary, throughout secondary school for 12 years of your life. We say that ultimately the types of people that you interact with also is limited to this, also experience the same type of thing. We argue that there's an echo chamber within these types of societies, and where these people only hear about these religious things, only can talk about these religious things, and they're not open up to any other type of thing. This is harmful because these individuals are no longer able to rationalize, and they only hear one specific type of information. We further argue that furthermore it harms societal change, because societal change is fundamentally stopped, and the drivers of change within these schools are only taught one thing. Things like supporting LGBT, things like supporting why women should have equal rights, cannot be supported because of the conservative narratives that occur within these type of schools. We say that under such proposition, individuals go to schools where they can have more other types, and we are very proud to propose.
I'd now like to call Joel to give his speech.
The fundamental flaw with the case coming from their side is that they have failed to engage with the spectrum of religious schools that exist. They present a very extreme, one-size-only policy from their side. They only talk about the most extreme of religious schools, the ones that always hate the LGBT people. We don't think that they have engaged with the majority in this debate. They need to do this in the next speaker. What is our stance? First, we will not abolish all religious primary and secondary schools. Second, this means that religious schools already operating will continue to do so and decide their curriculum. We accept, unlike them, that there is a spectrum of religious schools, from those where religion is the main focus in the case of Muslim madrasas, to those where religion is complementary to the syllabus in the case of many Methodist schools. Third, nonetheless, religious schools must teach compulsory lessons such as basic literacy and numeracy. We see this as already standard operating procedure. Fourth, we do not stand for extremist schools, as is already the case where we prevent secular schools from advocating extremist ideologies. Fifth, such religious schools can operate alongside other secular schools. And finally, we still stand for inter-school interactions and other such activities that promote interaction. The burden on key proposition, which they have not met, is the proof that all religious schools actively hurt a child's education and that hence it is illegitimate. We have three arguments. First, that we support the autonomy of parents and children. Second, that we protect education. And finally, that we empower acceptance. But before that, some rebuttals with their side. First argument they provided to us was about identity. They say that religious identity is illegitimate for these children. We questioned them, why is this necessarily the case? But they never actually told us this, and it only emerged later in the speaker that the unique problem they had was the indoctrination of these religious schools. Alright then, if they truly believe that children cannot choose an identity because religion is foisted upon them, this is going to happen on their side of the house as well, because parents are going to do it regardless of whether religious schools exist. So if they accept that religious schools are not the main drivers of this, then they have to accept that sometimes children can legitimately take on this religious identity. And they conceded as much, because when we offer a point of information, they said they will allow Muslim children to wear the hijab and Jewish children to eat kosher food. This accepts that on their side of the house, they willingly will allow these children to take on a religious identity. We don't think that the coercive nature of these schools is any fairer on their side. Second, they talked about the harm of these religious schools. Essentially, the core of their case was that religion as taught in these schools is always black and white. Really? Is that really the case? The reason why this is the case is not likely to be the case, unlike their side where they provided no systemic reason, is because the modern world means that many religious schools have to adapt to it. If not, they will lose a lot of people coming into their schools, they will lose a popular appeal. This is why, for instance, many religious schools already advocate for things like gay rights. They provided no systemic reason why this was likely to be the case. Next, they said that in the best case scenario, we do not teach evolution on our side. Alright, I will show you later my substantive why on the comparative, their side is only going to worsen this problem, because if they talk about echo chambers, their side voices it when parents take children out of schools and send them homeschooling instead. Finally, our argument is that religious schools by nature are not black and white at all. The very fact that they have Bible studies suggests that people debate and discuss what this religious content is. So what they talked about Bible studies suggests that religious schools are not as impulsive as they'd like to talk about. That is why on our side of the house, we actually better this problem. I'll further clash with this analysis in my substantive later, but first, how our side supports the autonomy of parents and children. The thesis of this argument is that religious schools are a legitimate means of education for children. The premise of this argument, and I think this is quite intuitive, is that parents know their children best. Being the most immediately related to them, parents are best placed to act, no thank you, in the interests of their child. This is why the state already gives great autonomy to parents in making choices for their children, from every single aspect of how they're brought up, including their religion, to major medical decisions. This autonomy should extend to a child's education as well, because parents know a lot better than the state what their child needs and how in this aspect as well. This is why parents already make whole or woman major educational decisions in conjunction with their children, from the choice of school they go to the fact of whether they want to go for homeschooling. But before I go on, yes?
Then why is things like blood transfusion not allowed?
We don't think this applies to religious schools. Blood transfusions will not be allowed by the most extreme of parents on both sides of the house at all. I really do not see where your point of information is coming from. Back to my argument. We accept that parental autonomy is not an absolute principle. All we are saying is that the threshold for taking this autonomy away should be exceptionally high. We therefore only do this when there is objective and massive harms than the alternatives, as in the case of child abuse. Religious schools, however, do not meet this metric because they are in fact beneficial in three ways. First, because religion in such schools provide children a sense of purpose and identity. I further clash with the arguments here. Being a child and building one's identity at this time is incredibly confusing. Religion provides a set of moral and behavioral codes for children to scaffold their identity. No thank you. For these children, the things you learn in school every single day are not just disparate facts about the world. School helps you organize the confusing world around these children into a coherent narrative and anchor their identity in religion. Second, religious education provides a sense of community as well, because it helps children further understand their place in the world. No, thank you. For a Jewish child in Israel, learning the Torah is intimately tied to the history of his people and the challenges his people has faced. Crucially, this is best assessed when they learn this in studies of scripture in school daily. Finally, we allow children to be morally upright individuals as well. All religious teachings, no thank you, promote certain good moral principles. Things such as thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal in the 10 Commandments, for instance. Teaching this through a religious lens in school is no different hence from any other secular civics and moral class we already do. Note, we are not saying that a religious education is always good for all children, but that it is a legitimate choice for parents to make this decision given its benefits. Hence, our side stands for the autonomy of parents and children. No thank you. Second argument, that our side protects education. The thesis of this point is that abolishing religious schools will hurt the education of religious children. I further clash with the analysis here. Let's establish, no thank you, that religious schools already tend towards balancing religious teachings and secular content. This is because, as I mentioned earlier, the pressures of modernization means that such schools tend to update the content. So on the vast majority of the spectrum which we are engaged with, we take this debate and all our benefits apply. No thank you. But we are engaging on the best case scenario as well. In the most conservative of religious schools, their side only worsens all the harms they talked about for two reasons. First, parents will simply pull their children out of school on their side. We're talking about religiously conservative groups of parents like those who live in the Bible Belt in the Deep South. These people want their children to be educated through a religious medium. In the absence of such schools, children will only be homeschooled. So, if they really believe that religious teaching is harmful and indoctrinating, then studying in religious communities and its impact only is worsened on their side because they force these children to live in insular communities. If they want to talk of echo chambers, that is what happens on their side of the house. At the very least, on our side, we force these children to go to schools, meaning that on the comparative, at least we allow some counterweight to this conservatism. Second of all, because of backlash from parents as well. Even if these parents still let their children stay in schools, they force parents to exploit every single moment with their child to ramp up in religious indoctrination as a counterbalance to what they perceive as secular schooling. Crucially, this form of religious influence is far more pernicious and coercive than that of religious schooling because it occurs at every single waking moment. So, it can happen through things like, for instance, when your parent sees a slightly effeminate friend, your mother tells you he's a bad influence and you should stay away from him. All these harms that they talked about conservatism is worsened on their side. So, they have never proven to us how their policy actually solves this problem. We tell you it only entrenches it. And that is why on opposition we say the choice is not restricted to the domain of the secular. Incredibly proud to oppose.
It is now my pleasure to ask Nishan to give her speech.
you want your children to be educated, if you want your society to actually have any social change, we don't think that their side's actually solving anything, right? The first speaker proposed to us a very weird case under their case, right? They talk about firstly that apparently religious schools are not religious at all because they want to maintain popularity. Like, even is that even a thing in the first place? But secondly, they told us that they don't actually oppose anything, right? That at the end of the day, these parents are still going to be extreme parents anyway. So therefore, at the end of the day, we don't really understand what their side's trying to propose, what their side is trying to solve in the status quo. Before I move on into my substantive, which will be talking about how we limit, they limit the ability of that child to integrate in the future, I have a few rebuttals to make. On the first rebuttal, they talk about the idea of the nature of schools, right? The first thing they talk about is that religious schools are very important because firstly, they provide children with a purpose and identity. Secondly, they provide these children with community. And thirdly, they provide these children with morality. But then again, is it like public schools don't have that anyway? Like at the end of the day, you still already give them the purpose of identity, right? There's still already platforms for you to be able to build your community inside schools like Anglo-Singapore that's not necessarily religious, right? But also things like how when you form morality, it's also shaped based on the idea that there's already parents inside the status quo as well as a school, right? That's when you provide for a best case scenario for them to be able to form that identity, because that's when you give them the choices to make, right? So therefore, we don't argue it's actually mutually exclusive. So therefore, these children will still get those type of benefits, right? The next thing they talk about is on the idea of apparently that these schools are not going to be religious because they want to appeal to people of like a more moderate case, right? We argue if religious schools are not going to try to be more religious, then what are they doing there? What's the distinction they have, right? If they're not going to be religious, then in that case, parents won't even send them to that school in the first place. We don't understand why they're trying to argue that context. So therefore, we move on to the example they gave of how there's going to be debate in Bible class. Do you think it's really likely going to happen that these individuals are going to have those debates in Bible class? Because in this scenario that they do, they actually have to go oppose against their religious values itself. That sometimes their religious values might not be extreme. We don't think those are the type of things religious schools are going to do. We don't understand what kind of world they live in, right? The next thing we argue is that if they argue that on their side, then they're secular, right? Then basically they're not doing anything in the status quo, right? Because there's no difference between any of the schools. They have to debate on our context where religious schools are actually religious. We don't understand what they're talking about. Now let me move on to my next rebuttal. They talk about how apparently parents are going to be more extreme about indoctrinating their children. Let's talk about this, right? We think that in the status quo, it's not like every parent is going to pull their child out of school because firstly, that's illegal. But secondly, we think that parents still want education, right? So therefore, in order for them to make that decision between the two, they have to prioritize whether or not they want that child to be competitive, whether or not they want that child to be able to become a doctor in the future, to become a politician in the future, or do they want their child to be stuck in their religious schools? Most parents, we argue, will still love their child and still make the best decision for their child to put them in a school and an actual school, right? But secondly, even in the worst case comparative, when they talk about how parents are going to pull them in and they're going to educate their children even if they go to these type of schools, right? Firstly, at the very least, we provide these children with counter-narratives. We don't understand which is something their side cannot provide at the end of the day. But secondly, if they're going to be homeschooled ultimately, we think that in the status quo now, at least the probability is that these children still get those type of education. These children still are able to tolerate in the future, right? And this is where my first speaker's argument becomes very important, right? Because we need to be able to allow for these children to be able to form their identity based on the choices they have, but secondly, also to be able to allow for them to activate social change, where governments are able to activate social change, right? Under their side, they're not going to solve anything because there's going to still be conservative individuals who are stuck in that loophole because of the idea that there's no other school to go to. But on our side, we're going to allow for the religious individuals, once they pass maybe the age of 18, the fact that they already have counter-narrative means that they're more likely to support things like feminism, they're more likely to support things like gay rights. That's the type of thing we change, something they don't. Now let me move on to my substantive, but actually let's take a few away. Okay, now let me move on to substantive. How they limit ability of these children to integrate in the future, right? We think that what's happening right now is that when you're constantly exposed to only
Give me a systemic reason why all religious schools must hate LGBT people.
Because if we think that in the status quo right now, if they don't actually do those type of things, they don't promote the things that religious people in the are more conservative about, then they don't appeal to parents of the types of conservative community, right? That's why they are not going to change, right? Because we argue that it's not, if parents are already trying to become more liberal, then they're probably going to send their children to a liberal school, not to a religious school, right? Now let me move on to the substantive. How do you limit the ability of this child to integrate in the future? We argue when you're constantly exposed to one thing in the case scenario where you're always going to school and you literally spend your whole life there. When you come back, you do your homework, you go to sleep, right? We think what happens there is that a lot of times this child only has one way of thinking. There's no counter narrative to that, right? And that's when you actually harm these children when they grow up. Because when they grow up, now that they're exposed to the real community, where they actually have to work with real people, for example, in their working community, or when they go out to places outside to be able to interact and do their work, right? We think a lot of times this means that when they have these type of different narratives, for example, they're trying to impose some kind of Mormon belief on somebody or those type of things, right? That's when they get ridiculed by society, right? Because they don't understand how to understand another person, especially if they're taught since young by religious schools that there's no other individual inside society who can exist, right? And that's when you actually harm the identity of these individuals, right? Because let's look at what happens, right? When they're not able to grow up in the future, either they're going to live in isolation, that means that they don't have any support system, or they're going to actually go into further echo chamber, right? That's when they're going to try to stick as close as possible to conservative communities. Yes, before I move on.
Why are religious schools and interaction exclusive?
Because when you're in a religious school, you interact with religious individuals, religious teachers, and because you have all the same stereotypes, you all have the same belief, that's when you don't have any other interaction to happen. If you argue inter-school, we think that's going to be very, very like you're probably going to interact with another religious school, by the way. But secondly, if that is also the case, then we think it's very minimal. It's not going to have any change in comparison to the hours you spend in school for 18 years of your life. Now let me move on with my substantive, right? So what does it mean when you actually go into an echo chamber, right? We argue that a lot of times you isolate your community away from other individuals. That means that you're not able to actually get the benefits from people inside your society, right? When the other people don't actually try to understand you, that's the case scenario when you're not able to actually integrate. Why is it problematic? Because we argue in the status quo right now, when there's so many people that are trying to integrate, when there's so many confusing conflicts that are happening, it's important for us to be able to interact between two societies, right? Because that's when you allow for these mindsets to be changed. And we argue it's not only the case that these children are not going to be educated when they're young, but also in the future, they're not going to be able to educate themselves, and that's something that we think is an exclusive harm that your side cannot tackle because these individuals cannot integrate into society. So what have we proven to you today? That firstly, religious schools are probably going to say religious, and it's not the context that you're trying to push on us. But secondly, we argue that these individuals are going to be able to make their identity much better. But secondly, that they'll be able to integrate, and that's when we allow for social change. We're very proud to propose.
I'd now like to call Brian to give his speech.
If you open the door, if you just it might
Does it help?
create some airflow.
Thank you.
So quite recently, Pope Francis says we should accept LGBTQ communities. By some bizarre team proposition logic, Pope Francis is not religious because he doesn't hate gays. Ladies and gentlemen, I think it is a simple fact that just because you're religious doesn't mean you cannot embrace other communities as well. They can. And that's why the majority in today's debate is not just the most extreme of religious schools, but others that belong equally in the spectrum, which they have refused to engage with in first and second speaker, both of them. So, we talked a lot about how religion can be beneficial, especially when all the harms we mentioned are mitigated by an evolving religion. None of them were responded to on their side. But let's deal with the minority on their debate as well. 2 questions. First, is there a choice? Second, how do we better education? First, is their choice. We argue for parental autonomy, and we give you benefits of identity, history, morality. What did they respond? They said public schools can do it too, and these benefits can still be garnered. Concession, therefore, that religious schools provide benefits. What we are saying is not that religious schools are necessarily better than public schools, but that it is a legitimate choice to choose religious schools. So in conceding that public schools can do this too, it also means that religious schools are equally capable and therefore should be a legitimate choice. You see, they told us why religious schools may not be the best of schools, and we accept that. But what we are saying is that you can choose this school if you want to. They never dealt with any of this analysis. And what is the parallel to this? Since they already accepted that people can wear the hijab to school or eat kosher, surely you can't allow religion to affect your everyday life even as a child. They never resolved this tension, even though we pointed out in the POI and in first speaker. But finally, we talked about identity. They claim you limit a person's identity. Okay, well, many schools do. Choosing a single-sex school or a co-ed school limits your identity. Choosing whether or not you go for a highly competitive school or a school which emphasizes cooperation and sharing will limit your identity and your worldview as well. Why is it that religion is a specific form of identity that we cannot limit when parents can limit all other forms of identity anyway? No answer. We win choice. We already win the bulk of this debate. But let's look at the second area, education. Here's where they try to push a burden on us by saying we have to create social change. No, we don't. They have to prove it, and neither speaker has proven a mechanism by which social change is created. Throwing out the word tolerance doesn't prove any mechanistic progress towards social change. They have 2 problems with our side. One, that bad morality is taught. We told you that's not systemic, right? A lot of people interpret the Bible very differently. So some people actually interpret it in a way that accepts homosexuality. We believe that it's entirely possible, and a lot of schools do that. They never engage the spectrum. Second, their contention was that evolution is not taught. Okay, we will accept that harm, okay? Say evolution is not taught. Believing that the earth was created 5,000 years ago doesn't affect my ability to live my life as a normal human being. They need to prove to us why evolution is somehow an a priori good, and everyone should learn it because they will dramatically affect your worldview, and they haven't. So they really already lost this debate. But what is the comparative? They believe all children can now go to state schools. If I prove to you that that is not true, they have lost the debate because they never gave us a compelling alternative to religious schools. Here's why. A lot of states today are not just states who are well-funded like many of us come from. Many of these states actually are underfunded, and a lot of religious institutions are actually providing the bulk of education in these states. What are the states we are talking about? I mean, close to both countries, we're talking about Indonesia, for example, where a lot of religious institutions provide education. We're talking about Gambia, where Islamic institutions provide a majority of the education. We're talking about Ethiopia, where Orthodox Christianity provides most of the education. In all of these situations, will they leave these children without any education? They never provided us an alternative where states are not able to fund these schools on their own accord. So, the alternative to religious schools is not secular school, it is no school at all. No answer from their side. And here's where we dispel the idea of the counter-narrative, because it only works on the premise that you actually go to a secular school. We already disproved that, but I'm going to take them at their best. Say you go to a secular school, why does the counter-narrative not happen? And by the way, since this is the premise of their second speaker argument, it deals with that as well. They assume that parental influence is static. That means they believe that just because you escape a religious school, parental influence, hold on a minute, is constant. I'm going to prove to you that it's not. But before that, please.
So you would be okay with sending these children to school when there are no counter-narratives at all?
No, okay. So there are counter-narratives. We provided it in our policy. We told you that we will encourage interaction between schools. You never really told us why this is systemically unable to happen. And yes, because we all live our lives in some degree of echo chambers. When I go to a single-sex school, I don't have a lot of counter-narratives either. That's perfectly fine. You never showed us why that is systemically a problem if I can build my identity in my own way I want using these schools either. So, moving on. Assuming parental influence is static, their case might work, but it isn't. Why? It's my first speaker's analysis that they fail to deal with that is destructive to their case. We told you how parents often ramp up the influence. They'll tell you how being gay is intrinsically wrong just because you're not able to go to a religious school. The thing is, while religious schools might be able to balance secularism as well as religion, parents might overdo this at the point in which they believe there is no other way society will indoctrinate their child into this religion. So thank you. So in this way, parental influence will actually increase and all the harms they believe we'll talk about is a lot worse. But what's worse is that parental influence is distinct from school-based influence. It is pernicious in a way that it affects your day-to-day lives. Sure, you spend 8 hours in school, but every other living moment is probably spent at home with your parents and interacting with them, and you're forced to do that for the rest of your lives. No thank you. We believe that this sort of pernicious influence that they create on their side is a lot worse than anything religious schools will create. I'll further deal, no thank you, with their constructive. I'm going to talk about how we empower acceptance on our side as well. I note that this is not our burden to prove, but I'm going to take them on their highest and prove it anyway. Core this argument is that abolishing religious schools entrenches discrimination on religious grounds. Let's make it clear. They accepted, no thank you, that there will be a transition period for these people to move into other schools. But the problem is we are already living in a quite tense society where a lot of people are bordering on being discriminatory to people of other religions. Discrimination, however, is not at its worst as of yet. We're resting on a very fine line which they push past. Why? Because closing down religious schools is a clear and visceral act. Conventionally populated locations like the Deep South schools are no longer populated. There is now an influx of new students, as they rightly put in their own policy. This comes along with the language of hatred and oppression. Listen to their own words. Religious schools and people in these schools, thank you, hurt other people. These people are immoral because they hate other communities. We believe this is the sort of language that entrenches discrimination. It comes in the form of microaggression, which really hurts the children the most. Be it walking away from the girl who is wearing a hijab, or bullying the boy who eats kosher because they put it, he doesn't like homosexuals. I suggest that this sort of language is what exactly entrenches discrimination in society. The real problem is when this transitional issue is not just a transitional issue, but entrenches itself to become a permanent one. Because after a period of time when their transition will take place, you normalize the kind of discriminatory power dynamics between people from what you consider secular backgrounds and people from what you consider religious backgrounds, as if they must be extricated apart. Using their own language, that is how they entrench discrimination. It eventually becomes things like political positions or societal views that widens divisiveness, as we already see today. The comparative is clear. We allow for coexistence and tolerance via the mechanisms we provided from the start, which they never contested. Eventually, in the long term, this could breed into acceptance on our side. They hurt any move towards acceptance and they entrench discrimination and oppression. Very proud to oppose.
I'd now like to call Parental to give her speech.
Understand where Singapore is going. On one hand, they say schools are also secular and support liberal ideas, but the other hand, these schools are in Ethiopia, in Indonesia. Those schools can exist in the same context, right? If you talk about schools that are very liberal, accepting, and why are those schools in extreme religious communities that do not go with each other, they need to understand the context. Then the whole case rests on two notions. One, the religious schools have an exclusive benefit that outweighs all the harm that we put on such proposition. Then secondly, that these religious schools are not actually religious, they're on a spectrum. Let's look at that first thing first. Who help society progress forward? They taught us this, that religious schools are not actually religious, guys, but more open to people. I think we already give you characteristics from my first speaker, right? Why these religious schools are most likely to be extremely centric around religion. Because whatever spectrum you are on, you're going to have those kind of things, characteristics like going to mass, going to Sunday service, teaching kids value lessons, and read the Bible. Those things are going to be there. So that idea, or whatever you're going to do, So whatever you're going to do, those characteristics are going to be there. We tell you, just because Pope Francis tell you accept LGBT, does not mean that transcends to every single person in the United States of America. But you see, certain people discriminate against LGBT even if the Pope Francis said so. Especially in these institutions where the nuns are teaching, or very religious people are teaching, they want to form the basis of kindergartens, of people in primary school, so they have a solid stand. So they're worried that these people will grow soft when they grow up. They're more likely to indoctrinate these kids with minds that they think there are. So just because Pope Francis is evolving does not mean these schools are evolving. Then they told you that, oh, we have interactions between schools, that's going to be fun. You're probably going to have interaction between religious schools and another religious school. I don't see how that helps with anything at all. Then they told us there are religious studies in there. People are approached to these things. But in many cases, in this society you talk about, these religious classes, no, if you stop your eye and listen to me, that these religious classes are going to be as very narrow and comparative. Okay, sure, you teach things like Buddhism and Muslim, but those are already contrasted to Christianity all the time, and why ours is still better and ours is a choice you want to make. Because the mindset that like Kiam had shown you, it's us or them, and those kind of mindset we think is very dangerous. But then they told us there are exclusive benefits. Let me hear you one. Exclusive benefits are 1. Learning to form your identity. 2nd, learning your history. 3rdly, learning your morality. Why? Because public school does not have that. You need to be able to prove those exclusive benefits outweighs the harm of the mentality you give to those children. Nothing inside opposition has been able to do that. But then they told us that we have a principal contradiction because we allow children to carry on those religious identities. No. We tell you, when you go to public school and you're in a more neutral environment, when you're able to interact with other people, those are harshly different. You're able to interact with people from different religions and talk about it. Those kind of contexts are different, so we think we need to respond to that. Then they talk about things like progression, right? Things like echo chamber. They talk about things like parents who are very extreme. We're probably going to take these kids out of school and therefore going to homeschool them. My first speaker already told you that if you think people are on a spectrum, that we don't think that these kind of parents all have the time to take these kids out of school and homeschool them every single day, right? But secondly, if these parents are very, very, very extreme, they're going to take their kids out to homeschool anyway, especially when you have a kid where school is also religious but secular. So those homeschool people are going to take them back anyway. We don't see how side opposition solves that. But in the other best, they're able to neutralize our argument. But they told us about things like counter-narrative, that parents have more influence over children and they're going to tell their children about things like religion. Yeah, we told you that happens in society, that my PM already told you that. We think that's not how they were trying to solve. By providing this thing called counter-narrative, where kids are able to hear from their parents but also hear from other people. So you think that you want to talk about a schools that actually also secular, liberal, and religious at the same time. Their parents are probably going to indoctrinate these children anyway, regardless what happens. So we don't think side opposition has provided any specific solution to do that. On the comparative, side proposition provides those counter-narrative for these people to be able to hear from something else. Then the second speaker, I want to talk about things like discrimination. Okay, we understand, even if in the best case scenario, when you put these kind of kids in these schools and therefore they create some sort of harm interaction. I mean, that's a harm that we're willing to make, right? The state does that all the time. When the state put people like African American into school with white people, they do that because it's a higher service there to make sure the integration happens, to make sure the acceptance happens. We accept those short-term harms, so we think we're allowed to do that. It's better than making sure that I'm only in a secluded area, I'm not interacting at all, and therefore discrimination does not happen because two types of people don't meet. That is not how you solve discrimination. But then they told us, then we're going to tell you that to be able to better learn this environment, how you actually integrate. Before I move on, yes. Okay, moving on. My second class point is talk about who maximizes the choice of your children. We understand Singapore point that children live in a society and therefore parents make certain choices for them and their choices are not absolute. Yeah, but it actually countered our point. Later, sir, they never actually countered our point about this is harmful. They only countered the principle that parents have a right to send children to school. What did proposition tell you? Religious schools school are very different from art school. If you go to art school and still want to take things like AP Chem, AP Bio, you can still do that. When you go to a religious Christian community school and you want to be Buddhist, you're not allowed to do that. That is the distinction we make. Student choices and child choice of being to form their own identity are inherently harmed by these kind of things, and therefore it's not just different as sending them to academic school. Yes.
For the most conservative of schools and parents, why won't this conservative backlash just be worsened on your side?
We already tell you, right, that we already told you in my PM that there will be some sort of short-term harm, but because one, sending school is something that is illegal, you don't send their kids to school. But secondly, we told you that parents, if you want to talk about spectrums of parents, they're not going to be like, oh, everyone's going to pull them out because they probably don't have time to homeschool all their children anyway. But thirdly, we tell you that you don't actually solve the problem because you say two groups of people don't meet and therefore discrimination does not happen. We don't say side opposition has been doing anything at all. But then their first place is this, that their best case is this, that these kind of kids are going to stay in these schools and parents are not going to indoctrinate them because they're loving and child. No, right? The best case is that these kids stay in these schools and we don't think these schools have incentive to be secular, to be liberal, because they want to maintain their religion there. We see no systemic improvement from side opposition to why they would accept LGBT when they've been accusing us systematically while we're not proving it. We tell you that the best case scenario of side opposition is this, that people remain in school. My parents teach them about Christianity. They learn a little bit of religion in comparative to Christianity. That they go out to the world believing that Christianity is my only choice. They go out to the world believing that me as a Christian and them as a Muslim are two separate group of people because I've never been friends with them before. The best case scenario on side opposition is this. They will allow these kids to pursue a variety of choices, to be able to open to those rational choices they want to be. We allow them to not be able to listen to their parents all the time. A worst case scenario is that there's a short-term harm of people interacting not interact badly. I think that's a harm we're willing to take in order for society to progress forward. I think Team Thailand stands for a real school, talking about actually religious school and not just avoiding the motion. Team Thailand has taken this debate. Thank you.
Thank you for your speech. I'd now like to call Rebuttal to give his speech.
They have not dealt with the bulk of our case. And the main reason for this is because they refuse to accept the spectrum we set up. They say, but if you're ultra-conservative and you're ultra-liberal, then you can't be one and the same. Yes, because they aren't the same person. They're different families with different parents who go to different schools. And these schools exist across many countries, both developed and developing countries. So yes, they aren't the same, but we've engaged on the different types of schools and different types of parents and how they're likely to react to this policy, and proven that across the entire spectrum, children will be worse off on your side of the house. Some parents might believe that we don't want extremely religious schools, and that moderately religious schools provide us sufficient and immense benefits for their children. We think those benefits occur on our side of the house. We've also talked about schools in developing countries, where often they are set up by charities which are religious in nature, and without these charities, there would have been no other school on your side of the house. So the comparative is no school, or they go to homeschool on our side. So they have to accept that that is the relevant comparative. Given that I've set up what the comparative is, let me ask two questions. First, what happens to children in ultra-conservative religious schools? Second, is religious education a legitimate and beneficial choice? First, what happens to children in ultra-conservative and religious schools? I'm going to take them on their highest ground. Assume that religious schools are somewhat coercive. I will show you that the comparative of parents is both qualitative and quantitatively worse for their child. They say, but parents will do so anyways. Yes, our argument is they will do so more, and therefore the child's life is a lot worse. So what's the comparative like? We told you that parents are likely to homeschool their children. Unlike what they say, homeschooling isn't always illegal. In fact, parents can just hide the religious aspect of the homeschooling where they already present their curriculum to the state, so we don't think that homeschooling for religious slant is something that won't occur. The next response was, but parents will do so anyways. No, if parents can choose to provide religious education through the proxy of a pastor, they want to do so. When this choice is no longer available, they will do so because they will do so via their own means, because they no longer have this choice of a pastor. So on the both sides of the house, they will receive some kind of religious education. Second, what if there's no choice? In many parts of Africa and countries like Indonesia, religious institutions are the ones which set up the schools in these regions. Without these charities, there would have otherwise be no other secular schools on your side of the house. So the relevant comparative is in fact religious schools. They can't just shove this comparative on the other side of the house. No, thank you. So the first thing I'd like to note here is that all of the harms that they mentioned exist on the other side of the house. But you know what? It's worse for three reasons. Firstly, they assume that removing specific mediums of religious influence will keep children safe. The assumption here is that the remaining mediums, in other words, parents, no thank you, will remain static. But we told you that when parents feel that children aren't receiving enough religious influence, they're likely to ramp up their own religious influence over these children. What does this look like? At the breakfast table, during Sunday family outings, when the father drives the child to school, even if he does send him to a secular school, they're likely to pressurize their child. They're likely to tell the child, you have to be staunch. Every action you take in school needs to be a staunch Catholic. They're likely to tell the child, never interact with friends that you might think to be gay or lesbian. These are the kind of pressurized cookers that these parents put upon these children on their side of the house. We accept parents are conservative, but they become even more conservative on the other side of the house. So the net amount of religious coercive influence that is imposed upon children increases when parents are able to increase their influence. So when they say, we want a counterbalance, this is an euphemism for tension and conflict. When the child goes back and tells his mother that, I learned about evolution, my teacher told me that the Bible is lying, how is the mother likely to react? She's going to be really angry that the teacher is teaching things that's against the Bible. He's likely to spank the child and say, you should never listen to your teacher, you should never do these kind of things, especially for the most conservative parents they've talked about. So this is the relevant comparative on the other side of the house. Thirdly, because it qualitatively works, the influence of parents is particularly pernicious. Now, I said that schools can be conservative, but they have an incentive to regulate themselves because they don't want to be seen as to society as extremely crazy, because they want to have many people sending their children to these schools to begin with. In contrast, parents can do many things without other people checking on them. Parents can do things in secret. They can do things in their houses. And these are interactions. They have no check and balance from the state. And therefore, the actions parents have are far more pernicious and allow for even more oppression. No, thank you. Lastly, what about the transition process? No response to my second speaker's substantive about how their side legitimizes the idea that religion is bad, that they can never achieve social change, that they'll never be able to respect people of the LGBTQ community. If they normalize this idea, how are these children going to be bullied when they go into these secular schools, even if they do? They're likely to say, you are a person who I'll never interact with because you can never accept me for who I am. They ostracize these children, even in religious schools and secular schools, it is far worse. Yes?
So why are governments that are not secular in the first place have an incentive to abolish the religious school? Are these the context you are talking about?
Secular governments means that they respect your ability to pursue religious freedom. It does not mean that we clamp down on all forms of religion, but your right to pursue whichever religion you want and to not prioritize certain religions over others. That is why we allow for Christian schools and Islamic schools as well. Second question, is religious education a legitimate and beneficial choice? I've taken them on their highest ground. Assume that parents and schools are coercive, it is far worse on the other side. But what about parents and schools which aren't? The first benefit here was about social change. The subtext of this argument is that if you're conservative, if you're religious, you will never be able to understand other people. I think this is wrong. I think there are many religious people who can understand other people. How many Christians or Muslims are there in this room who do believe that LGBTQ communities are fair and legitimate? I don't think they can make this assertion. Secondly, religion will always exist and religious communities will always exist. True acceptance is when these religions are able to embrace these ideas, not to convert every person within these religions. Third, the assumption in this argument is that people will just suddenly enclave together. Everyone who's Christian will enclave together, and everyone who's Muslim will enclave together. Why? Daily interactions still exist. People interact with people with different faiths, even people who are atheists as well. But lastly, if they believe that children can choose religion at the age of 18, all of the harms they mentioned will still occur because eventually they're religious. So I'm not sure why they will stand for social. They won't have social change on the other side of the house. The starting point of their argument, therefore, thank you, was that children are starting to form their identity, and we agree. But the process of forming your identity is not just about keeping an array of options. It's also about allowing you to further and deepen a particular identity that you want to have. The logical extension of their argument is that we don't want children to explore or have an identity at all until they are 18. But we disagree, because we think there's value in allowing children to pursue a religious education for 3 reasons they did not deal with. First, because they can rationalize the world around them, not just through education, but religious education. 2, because of the sense of belonging, not just the schools you have, but the religious communities you have as well. And 3, because on the outside, you have a sense of morality deepened by religion. They say that these things can be provided through secular schools as well. We agree, but religion provides a unique slant on this. For them to say that religion has no added value to education at all is demeaning and degrading of religion. We do not support this. Second, they say, but there's some things which are core to religious schools. Yes, prayer sessions are called to religious schools. I don't see how prayer sessions are this massive tool of indoctrination that will make people zombies. I think outside of the house, there are many things that outside can do that does not even allow for this indoctrination. Their last concern was about a lack of an opt-out clause. The first thing I contest is that people will be zombies and have no rational choice on the outside of the house. We think some agency is still preserved at the age of 18 or 21 and you can still make a trade-off for yourself. But second of all, we don't think that you're only limited to interacting with people from religious communities. When you walk in the park, for instance, when you go to the supermarket, you're going to meet other people from different faiths, you're going to be atheists, you're going to meet agnostics. The chit-chat you have with the waitress that you see in the restaurant is going to provide you interactions that are meaningful on our side of the house. Our side ensures that people can pursue religion. Choice is not restricted to the domain of the secular.
It's now my pleasure to ask Brian to give the opposition's reply speech.
Excuse me, would you like me to knock after 3 minutes?
Yes, that's fine. My third speaker, Wei-Ho, came from a religious primary school, and yet he's able to interact perfectly fine with me and Joel, who may be of entirely different religions. He doesn't hate homosexuals, and so apparently, according to Team Proposition's logic, he's some exception. Apart from the fact that I know a lot of people who are like him, and it's the bulk of the debate that they never were willing to engage with at the end of the day. You see, Team Proposition presented a discriminatory and disempowering world. It was a narrow world. Literally, the only people they were talking about must fulfill the following characteristics. They must be the most extremely religious, they must be from the most developed countries with the best governments, best school systems, they must be able to wear and eat things in accordance with their religion, but that must not affect their identity. Who are these people? No one. They were constructing a false sense of what human beings actually are in order to try to advocate against, by the way, all religious schools, not just the most extreme. So even in their best case scenario, they were refusing to engage with any of the matter we brought in from Team Opposition based on engagement alone. They've already lost this debate. But here's the thing, they never presented a compelling alternative. Sure, they can diss these religious schools all they want to their side, but they never showed us why education would happen. We told you about Indonesia, Gambia, Ethiopia, and I can keep going on, Mozambique, Chad, but I won't because it will take up too much of my time. In so many of these countries, religious institutions are crucial to providing education. Without them, the alternative is not to go to school. And by the way, saying education is compulsory is not a solution if there's no school to go to, because, yeah, sure, it's compulsory, but if you can't go to a school, then it might as well not be. So, they never engaged the vast spectrum of this debate which we were willing to engage on. What happens if there's no school? The truth is they will either have homeschooling or no school at all. And that is where all the harm that they talked about fall on their side. Because they were never willing to engage when we talk about how parental influence isn't static. It changes at the point in which parents think there is no control over their children's day-to-day lives in a religious sense. So if parents believe that children are exposed every day for, I quote, 8 hours to things that are non-religious and secular, parents will spend every living moment with their child, indoctrinating them in the same way they believe is bad for children. And what's worse is when we told you it is more pernicious. It is something that affects every single thing you do, every single interaction with your parents. Absolutely no response coming from Team Proposition. But finally, they created a discriminatory rule, where during the transition period, they enforced the stereotype that they talked about, that religious people hurt others, that religious people are immoral, and this becomes permanent. A permanent world of discrimination is what Team Proposition was fighting for in their own little bubble, refusing to engage with ours. And that's the world we want to escape from, into the world of opposition, which is clear and empowering. We stood very firmly from the start for legitimate choice. We told you that religious schools have benefits, and there are also limitations. We were willing to accept even their best case scenario, but we told you that that is a choice for parents to make. In the same way, I come from a school who doesn't have rugby courses for my CCA, but I'm still perfectly willing to go there even though I can't fulfill my identity as a rugby player. Parents already make many decisions for their child. Why is this any different? Absolutely no response. In saying that public schools can do this too, they mean religious schools also can do what public schools seek to do. In which case, why is that a wrong choice? The foundation of our case was very clear. Maybe the benefits don't outweigh all the harms, but why is it that that is not a legitimate choice for parents to make? Absolutely zero response from Team Proposition. But we advocated beyond what we needed to do on our side because we were so clear on our model. We told you how our side can lead to long-term acceptance, how our side can create change in the future when we allow for assimilation and interaction, not saying that some schools are inherently wrong, some schools are inherently immoral. We thread the fine line and eventually we create the kind of acceptance that society needs, especially today. They demonize and discriminate. We cannot stand for that sort of world. And that's why from the start, we were clear on our baseline that choice is not restricted to the domain of the secular.
Now my pleasure to ask Rebuttal to finish this debate and give the proposition's reply speech.
The reason side opposition has cross-interaction between schools is that they recognize the importance of interaction, they recognize the importance of people going out and humanizing the different types of people that exist within society, to see and to understand how an LGBT person talks, to see that they are human. That is the type of interaction that is missing on side opposition. Because within inter-school interactions, what do you have? Oh wait, you have two religious schools talking to each other. That's the only thing you get. We say that under side opposition, individuals are less likely to humanize other individuals. Individuals are more likely to buy into the narrative that their parents talk about. But what is the world we're talking about? We say that poorer countries, like side opposition wants to talk about, are unlikely to have secular governments anyways. So we don't understand what side opposition is trying to say when they say that they're incentivized to monitor, incentivized to place money into trying to ensure that these individuals are going to receive the best education that they get. We say that in these type of countries, they're likely to have extremely religious schools. And therefore we say that for example, if it's an Islamic school and then a Christian missionary school wants to come in, we say that the government is likely going to shut that down. Either way, we say that that's not the type of world that proposition is talking about. So what is the type of world we're talking about? The type of world we're talking about is a type of world where individuals are able to enter a secular school and form identity on their own. When individuals are exposed to religious other individuals of religious beliefs, other individuals who may not fit the stereotype that their parents talk about. We say that that is the type of world that we're able to give you. But what was side opposition's world? They came up and they talked about how they wanted, in their policy in the first speaker, they talked about how they wanted moderate schools. They didn't want to support extreme schools. We said that doesn't this mean that you can see there's already something wrong with religion being inside schools? We said that if you cannot monitor how extreme these religious schools will or will not be, why don't you just err on the side of caution to ensure that these individuals are able to receive the best education that they can? Secondly, they talked about inter-school interaction. I say I've already dealt with this in my introduction. Now let's talk about what side opposition did bring up. We said that they brought up on the idea of how microaggression is going to occur during the transition period. We say that microaggression is going to occur anyways. But what side opposition doesn't do is that when these people grow up, when these people become employers, What side opposition doesn't do is that they don't allow these individuals to see African Americans, to allow to see LGBT as beyond the image that their parents have painted for them. We see that since microaggression is going to occur anyways, what you need to do is to allow tolerance within society, to humanize the people within your school. We say the side proposition is the one solving microaggression, not side opposition. Secondly, they talked about how parents will be overly religious and how parents can do things in secret. We say that exactly because you cannot control what parents do anyways. You would rather have a counter-narrative to provide. We say what side proposition does is that we allow these individuals to have an alternative, allows these individuals to understand that there is more than one choice, more than one religion. So even if parents keep telling them that, even if parents on side opposition want to amp up and they want to become more religious, they want to spend every living second that they have to tell their children that LGBT is bad. We say that what side proposition's children does is that they know that it's wrong. What side proposition does is teach children that there is more than one person. So even if we concede that parents will amp up and they pull children we say that we're the ones solving this problem. Lastly, they talked about how parents will pull their children out of school. We say that no, because parents ultimately will choose their education. Parents will ultimately choose the importance of providing their children education to ensure that they're going to send their children to school. We say that what side opposition does is that they don't solve this type of problem, and ultimately we say that in secular schools, what side proposition gives you is the ability to make more than one choice, the ability to ensure that individuals can have an identity unique to their own, not just what their parents tell them, not just what schools tell them.